Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Her Podcast. I'm here with my good friend, one of my oldest friends, or longest friends. I don't know which one would be 100% right, but Mary and I have been friends since we were 8 and
I was
7. You were 7, I was 8. So since elementary school, we've been friends for over 20 years. And she's joining me here on today's podcast. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of context as to why. So, about 2 weeks ago, Mary, myself, and a few leaders from our church, we went to one of our church retreats with young girls and just kind of, those things that happen, everything was done. We're back in the cabins and we're just talking. And we're talking with some of our friends that have also been our friends for like 10, 15 years. And Mary and I start telling stories about our past relationships. Both Mary and I are both married. Mary has a beautiful baby boy, Lucas, with her husband. You guys have been married now for how long?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. I've been married for almost 6 years, and I have 3 babies. That ratio is very, very questionable ratio. Not questionable, but very 0 to 60 ratio there in my house. But so we're both happily married. We both married, men of God. We have healthy, happy marriages, thank God. So because of that, as we're sitting and we're talking to our friends here, or not here, but there in the cabins after we had just finished ministering to young girls, these people were just out of their mind surprised that we had been through some of the things we've been through, So Mary and I are sharing, and both Mary and I, and this is why specifically I wanted to have you on, because we are a certain profile of girl. And I think everyone will benefit from listening to this podcast, but I think more than anyone, the same profile of girl as us will benefit, which is we are the grew up in church, Christian parents, love the Lord at a young age. Neither Mary or I really ever went through this big rebellion. We love the Lord. I've always loved the Lord. Mary has also. And I just think at a very young age, because of all those factors, we started looking for our Prince Charmings. And so going back to the story I was saying before, people were out of their minds surprised that we had been cheated on, that we had been involved in some toxic situations and relationships, because all of them came from these different backgrounds where then they accepted Christ and they had a new life in Christ. And I guess they kind of assumed, oh, well, of course we had toxic relationships because we were outside of the church. But good girls who grow up in the church don't have to go through things like that. And that's where Mary and I were like, oh no, we let these things happen to us for whatever reason. And that is what today's topic is here on Her Podcast. We are going to be talking about toxic relationships within the context of the church, and why two Christians, or sometimes it's not two Christians, sometimes it's two church members, why two church members or two, quote, using the air quotes, Christians don't always make a healthy relationship. Right, Mary?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important distinction too. Two church members versus two Christians. That's important for girls, anybody really in the church, to know that that's a big distinction, and that's something that you have to think really critically and observe really critically when you do begin to get into relationships, about whether is this person a church member or is this person actually looking to have a relationship with Christ and looking to grow in their relationship with Christ.
Yeah, you can never let your filter down. And I think that's one of the things that happened to me. Getting into what I would love to do today is us reflect. So one of the things I love about Her Podcast is I feel like it's a letter to my younger self, a letter to myself in my 20s. I am now in my 30s, flirty and thriving, but I am now in my 30s, and I feel like a lot of times I just come on Her Podcast and I just say things that people did tell me in my 20s, but I didn't always listen. But things that I would still love to just perpetuate and put out there in the world for all my little sisters right now, my little sisters in Christ that are in their 20s or in their, late teens. And if you're older than that, it doesn't mean you have to turn this off. But I think if you're older than that, you might resonate. You might have been through some of these things with us. But I'd love to get into why. And I think that was one of the reasons for me. I wanted church to be my only filter. So it was kind of like, if he's here, then that's it. I don't have to think anymore. Because he's here. Because I found him inside church.
Yeah, because that's what everybody does in church. Like, everybody comes to church, and I mean, for me, you know, I'm the youngest of 4, and everybody before me had my sister met her husband my oldest sister met her husband when she was 15 in church. My other sister met her husband when she was 16, 17 in church. My brother was dating my best friend who he met in church. So I was like, well, it worked out so perfectly for them. They had great relationships. They were my sisters were probably happily married by the time I was 15 or 16. So I was like, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be fine. There's not gonna be any problems. There's not gonna be any. We're not gonna really have to, you know, do deep research and like deep dives into who these people are, because they're here, they're in church, they're working on themselves. Like, that assumption was made by me pretty much about everybody that I came into contact with. Like, if they're in church, I'm working on me, so they must be working on them too. Like, of course, that's what we do in church. You know, the Holy Spirit confronts us, convicts us, and we change and we adjust and adapt. And that's not the case for everybody, which we learned the hard way, I think.
Yeah, we learned the hard way, and I learned also being older was when I started to learn even about myself that we as human beings are multifaceted, and just because a person is working on themselves spiritually does not mean that they've even begun to scratch the surface of where they need to work on emotionally.
Yeah.
So like in my case, I had 2 long-term relationships before I got married, and both of these individuals, I don't even believe them to be very terribly bad people, but they were not ready to have a mature relationship with a person who was serious about marriage. Like, they did not meet all of that criteria. And in my case, you know, my first relationship was, you know, in my teens, and then both of my relationships were in my teens, and one of them carried on into my early 20s. And I wasn't able to see those red flags because of exactly what you're saying, because I assumed I'm working on me, they've got to be working on them. But what I didn't realize is they were working on themselves, but they hadn't gotten to, and I don't think we can't work on all the places that we need to fix in our lives at once. So I think, hey, it was great they were giving that first step, because I'd also hate for somebody to watch HerPodcast and be like, you see, even the daughter of a pastor is saying nobody in church is worth anything. That's not the case. But they were young guys, and that's where I didn't really see or understand. I don't think Disney helped.
No.
Disney did not help.
Or Twilight. We came of age in the Twilight era.
Wow.
Twilight
She went there.
is garbage, and it's fake, and it's not. That is a toxic relationship, but we'll come back. We can talk about that
Very
another
toxic.
day.
No, that's true. And I think that, you know, we see Disney and we see these young girls throwing themselves on the pillow, and we just say, wow, look at that passion. You know, look how much they had to go through. Somebody told me the other day, they said, you know, I used to believe that the couples that went through the most were the ones that went the farthest. And I said, well, that's dysfunctional. You know, like, I hate to tell you this, but that's not necessarily true. Sometimes just meeting a nice person and having a healthy relationship, that will give you the best result, not necessarily having to go through so many ups and downs. Not that you should give up on a relationship based on ups and downs, but I think that belief that you have to struggle can make way for many toxic habits.
Yeah, I think when I finally met my husband, something that I applied very strictly was that I wanted to fall in love with someone who didn't make me think that being in love was hard. And that was, I can't take credit for that. I read that somewhere, and I was like, that's true. I don't want to be with somebody who makes me think that being in love with them was hard. And that was the most different thing about my husband, that it wasn't hard to fall in love with him. It wasn't hard to be with him. Yes, we've had ups and downs. Neither of us are perfect. Yeah. Neither of us are perfect. Our relationship is not 100% perfect, but it's not hard. I haven't had to fight to get his attention. I haven't had to fight to feel loved or to feel respected or anything like that, which in our youth, that was something that I struggled with. It was a fight to be, I want to feel loved. I want to feel cared for by someone. And that was not something that I always got, it just didn't happen. I was made to think that I had to fight for it, or that I had to do more, or that something I was doing was wrong. And that it didn't work out. It just left me hurt. It left me confused. It left me like, well, what's happening? Like, these are guys in the church. Like, where am I supposed to turn to now? Like, who am I supposed to look for now? And I think part of the problem for me too was that you grow up in the church and everything is so centered on marriage, which I do think is important. I do think that if you're not dating with some sort of long-term goal, like, obviously marriage, there's some time wasted in there, but I don't think that you should so exclusively focus on marriage that you don't think, you don't really do the work yourself. I felt like I'm mature. I want to get married. I want to be married young, and everyone in my family had gotten married before 25, so I was like, well, that's where I'm headed. So I have to be, focus on every relationship is a potential marriage relationship, and I didn't do the work of like growing up. Yeah. I didn't do the work of maturing, really. I kind of just assumed because, sometimes I hang out with my siblings who are older. I'm mature. I can fit in with them. Or, in church, a lot of your friend groups, they vary in age. Like, at least that's always been the case for us. We're always hanging out with people who are older. And even we talked about this, the guys that were oftentimes interested in us were older. So I said, well, if this is an older guy that's interested in me,
of someone 10 years older than me,
I must be mature enough to handle it. And I really wasn't at that point either. At 15, 16, while yes, I was thinking long-term and praying long-term about a future marriage relationship, I had to grow up. I had to be a 15, 16-year-old and go through that stage of my life before I was truly ready to say, these are the things that I truly value. These are the things that are really important. These are the things that are non-negotiable, because what was not negotiable for me at 15 wasn't the same as 25, 26 when I actually did get married. It was different. And I think that's an important part for us girls to remember, is that we have to grow up too.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's twofold. One, we're Christian girls, when all of this is going down, when we're 15, 16, 17, 18, we're number one Christian girls, and number two, we are Latina Christian girls. So being Christian, I think, fed this idea that any boyfriend that you have, let's hope it's your husband, because you also don't want to have a track sheet. Which we spoke about that day and we spoke about earlier today. Also, you don't want to have that track sheet. You don't want to have 7 boyfriends, 7 ex-boyfriends when you get to the altar, which I stand behind that. I definitely don't think you should actively seek to have a million, but I also think that in that thinking, because I am a 3 on the Enneagram, and I do care a lot about my image and how people see me and how people perceive me, and I was part of the leadership. At 16, I was already one of the main worship leaders of our church, and that mattered a lot to me. I didn't want to have, so I would stay in relationships longer than necessary to not have that track sheet. And then number 2, you're Latina, and I think in Latina culture, in Latino culture, you have this idea that you don't need to finish growing up until you're married. So we had parents who were very much, which eventually I broke the mold, and I told my dad, I'm going to move out and I'm going to live on my own, which I am not telling anybody to do, but I'm saying that I came to the realization at 24 years old, I was not married, I was not getting married, but I said, I don't need to wait until I'm married to do the things that I want to do. Not because it's bad to do that. And I also, I want to be very careful, because there's a reason why some of those things are in place. There's a reason why, our parents are trying to tell us, be careful. I do believe that the person you marry will kind of finish and complete a lot of your maturing, and as iron sharpens iron. And I believe all of that wholeheartedly. I just also believe that I wasn't working on myself, exactly what you said, because I was thinking, I'll figure that out when I'm married. So financially, I spent like an animal because I was like, I'll be financially responsible when I'm married and my husband does my finances for me. It was like this stunting of womanhood, or it's like, I'm not going to learn how to clean now or do the dishes now, because when I'm married, everything is going to magically fall into place, which I want to bring that to the table too. There is a glorification of marriage in the Christian culture and in the Latino culture that is like, everything is going to fix itself, and I am going to become like my mother, because maybe my mother got married when she was 17 and she was forced to grow up. So we think I'm going to be forced to grow up too when I get married. But what happens is that if we are not careful, we will marry the wrong person. And if we're not careful, maybe we won't marry them. I thank God that I didn't marry these people that I was in relationships with before. But I did take a lot of abuse. And I didn't realize that. You know who had to tell me that? I don't know if you know this part of my story, but a prophet had to tell me that I was being emotionally abused. When I was in a relationship with one of these individuals, a prophet came to the church and said, you are in love with someone right now. And you don't realize it, but he is emotionally abusing you. And I knew so little about emotional abuse because, thank the Lord, I grew up in a household where my father loved my mother and my mother loved my father. And you have the same thing. And they would, they would kiss almost too much. And we would be like, oh, mom, dad, why are you... Like, they would kiss and they would love each other and they would support each other. And they had these, they had this beautiful marriage. So I didn't even know what emotional abuse really looked like, and I didn't know how subtle it could be, because I thought if I was getting emotionally abused, I was like, for sure I would notice. And I want to define very quickly, because I found this definition of a toxic relationship. This term was coined by a Dr. Lillian Glass, a California-based communication and psychology expert, who defines a toxic relationship as any relationship between people who don't support each other, where there's conflict, where one seeks to undermine the other, where there's competition, where there's disrespect, and where there's a lack of cohesiveness. So I bring that definition to the table because I did not realize that some of those relationships were toxic, and some of the relationships that I've seen since then in other people and other young women and other young men, the relationship is toxic, not even necessarily because one of the people is bad, but because you two are not cohesive. And the Bible says a good tree cannot give bad fruit. So if your relationship is giving bad fruit, what is bad fruit? Anxiety, constant fights, 11 and a half breakups in the past year, guys. And I say that, I did not whip that number out of my butt. I had a relationship where we had 11 breakups in 1 year. That's about, if you're doing the math at home,
1 per month.
That's about 1 breakup per month, guys. And we would break up because we could not get along, and we were in a power struggle where we'd be like, fine, then I'm breaking up with you. Fine, then I'm breaking up with you. Fine, then I'm breaking up with you. And it became this toxic struggle. And going back to what I was saying originally, I didn't realize I was being emotionally abused because I thought emotional abuse was going to be obvious, but it's not. So I'd like to get into a little bit now, and we don't have to say our whole entire stories, although it would be fun and entertaining, and maybe I'll tell you guys another time.
It was an interesting conversation.
But yeah, so this night when we were talking about this, we were laying it all out there. And people were just flabbergasted. They were like, I couldn't. What was interesting to me was my friend Anthony, who he was here on the podcast. So he was one of the people I'm talking to. That he said, Vane, I never would have thought you'd accept something like that. And that kind of broke my heart. Not because of Anthony.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But it broke my heart for little Vane.
Yeah.
For, 18, 19-year-old Vane. Because I was like, I don't think little Vane knew how much she was accepting that she didn't have to.
Yeah, on the way here, I was thinking the same thing. I literally kept replaying the conversations in my head, and I said, let a man tell me, let anyone tell me or talk to me the way that I was spoken to during that time. Regular. Let anybody say things like that to me, and I would have no problem. I'm a 9. I don't know if I would tell them to their face, or maybe I would go to my 8 wing in that moment and just be like, no, but I would remove myself from that situation. And I thought this person or these people, because it happened in a few different occasions, these people, no, but they love me, like they have my best interest at heart. They just, we haven't fully figured things out, like the timing's just a little bit off, but how can the timing be off for years? Like that's a huge flag. The timing's not going to be off for years. You might, there might be a time where you have to take a second a week or month apart to kind of regroup a little bit in relationships. It happens. I get that. But how can the timing always be off? How can it always be, no, it's just, right now is not good. right now's not good, and then I'm not going to talk to you for a few months, and then I'm going to come back and reel you right back in. Like, that, I would never take that from a person. I wouldn't take that from a friend, much less somebody who claims to love me, much less somebody who claims to want to be with me. You know, that was something that was so hugely different about my husband when I married him, is that he pursued me. Like, he truly pursued me, and to the point where I remember that I was a little shady at one point, because I was like, I'm not really sure, like, this is getting real serious, and I was like, no, I'm not going to talk to him. Like, I was like, no, like, forget it. And this man did not leave me alone. He was like, what's going on? What did I do wrong? What do we need to fix? And that was so different for me, for somebody to take ownership and say, maybe I did something wrong, as opposed to try to turn the tables on me and all the things that I didn't have, or all the ways I wasn't enough for that relationship. That made such a huge difference. And so I think for girls, because I didn't have the experience of having officially boyfriends. I was strung along in another way of, like, we're talking, but it's not really official.
So let's not tell anyone.
So yeah, so we have to keep it on the DL. Like, it's, you know, it's kind of like, we'll get there. You know, we're not ready to be official yet, so we're not really going to tell anybody. So I was strung along in that way, in the fact that I couldn't even tell my friends, like, hey, this is bad. Like, I don't feel good. I'm always second guessing myself. I'm feeling really insecure. I'm feeling really anxious, because I wouldn't even have known what to tell them, because nobody knew. I didn't have, like, you know, now I know that, like, I should have just spoken up. But at the time I was like, I can't tell anybody, because then he'll get so mad at me. And then he'll definitely not talk to me. Then we'll never become official, you know? And so I think that's so important for people to remember, is like, how you feel, how a person makes you feel is important. How a person, you know, continually makes you feel is them sending you a message.
Yes. And I saw something online one time that said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
Yes.
And I think that, again, it comes back to us. I love what you said when you said, they care about me. They have my best, you know, my best interests at heart. Well, you know what? Not always. Not everyone in the church has your best interests at heart. And I think there's such a healthy balance, and this is with anything in your life. There's a healthy balance with accepting people as they are, being sympathetic and empathetic to their humanity, and not writing people off because of that. But at the same time, understanding, having a little bit of street in you and a little bit of hood in you. This is what I was lacking in my 20s. A little bit of hood that tells you, you know what? People lie. Yeah. I remember my dad one time told me, he sat me and my brother down, and because me and my brother were both defending a friend. It wasn't any kind of romantic relationship, but we were basically, my dad was telling us, get away from this person. He was a good friend of both mine and my brother's. And my dad said, well, I'm about to teach you guys. We were both defending him, like, no, because he said this and he said that and he promised this and he's going to help us do this. And my dad said, I'm about to teach you guys something that's going to change your world. And we were like, wow, what's this man going to say? You know, this man been pastoring for 30 years and whatever. What's he going to say? And he said 2 words, Christians lie. And we were like, wow. And he said, and that person is lying. And unfortunately, at the time, I was young enough that if I would have internalized that and processed it well, I would have applied it to a few different things along the way. And I didn't know how yet, because I accepted what was told to me as true. I accepted when people spoke to me and said something to me, I accepted it as true. That's number one. And that's a big no matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're in church, out of church, in school, out of school, doesn't matter. Somebody could simply be lying. So always ask yourself, what does this person have to gain by me remaining in the dark? You know, I had a few conversations. I've had a few conversations, like interesting conversations with people over the past years, where I've asked them that. Well, why would this person want you to believe that even if it wasn't true? Do they benefit from you believing that? Yeah, they benefit, because then I'll do this and this and that. And I said, well, you have to take that into account, because if they had no stake in it, if they had no dog in this fight, my husband always says that. He says, I have no dog in this fight, you know, when he has nothing to do. If they had no dog in the fight, then maybe But if your entire reason for staying with them is based on this, then all they have to do is get you to believe this. So that's number one. Don't accept everything everybody's telling you is true. And number two, I love what you said, Mare, that you said how someone makes you feel matters. And I think that so many of us have those emotional wounds from our past, and it's a lot of different numbers. Their wound relates to this core message of your feelings are not important. So for the three, it's like your feelings are not important as long as you are performing and doing what you need to do. I think that's what kept me in relationships. Me specifically, I was always in relationships with people's LinkedIn profiles more than I was with the actual person. So this is what I did. I don't know if this is what you did, but what I did was, if he's in the worship team, if he's good looking, if he looks like he would look good in a poster, in a conference poster next to me, I was so aware of where I wanted to be in ministry that I would accept almost any type of treatment from somebody who fit the LinkedIn profile. You know, like if they looked good on stage and if they spoke well and if people liked them, I would let them treat me like crap. And how they made me feel, I didn't realize that is just as important. And I remember one of my uncles, you know, he's not my uncle, but he's one of my ministry uncles, you know, a friend of my dad, Robert Osado. He said, one day I was heartbroken, and he happened to come visit in the middle of this big heartbreak that I had with that same individual that was emotionally abusing me. And when it finally all blew up, I lost 15 pounds. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was so embarrassed. I was going through just so many things. And that's one of the things that you don't realize, that when you're being emotionally abused, you think that when you finally break with the abuser, you are going to be better off than they are. But something had you accepting the abuse, and whatever loneliness or fearfulness or emptiness or sadness that caused you to accept that abuse is still there. And it's exposed now, and it's an open wound now. So he caught me right at that moment, and I remember he told me, Vane, if you're going to err on the side of love, not the side of ministry. Because ministry can come and go. You know, don't marry somebody's profile. Don't marry who somebody is on social media. Don't be with somebody because of how good looking they are, how much your mom likes them or your dad likes them. That's what would keep me in these relationships. I'd be like, I already introduced him to my dad, and my dad thinks he's cool, and they bonded, and we have all these pictures on social media, and we write poems to each other on social media, and what's everybody gonna say? But how I felt mattered.
Yeah, there's no reason for you to keep being in something broken. And actually that makes me think of something that my parents said to me when I was going through this time is, I always said, ever since I was little, I don't even know where it came from, but I always said that whenever my dad was okay with, my dad specifically, my dad's a very serious, like he doesn't really let you in on what he's feeling a lot. He's very like stoic, and I don't know, maybe it's like me, like I wanted him to approve, like that's a whole other whole. But I always said whenever it's the right person, I feel like my dad will let me know. You know, like he'll agree, he'll be cool with it. And in my stubbornness, in my like absolute, I don't know, blindness to everything that was happening, I remember my dad just saying to me, he wouldn't outwardly just be like, no, you can't talk to these people, but he would say, your life, like look at your life. You have parents that love you, you have siblings that love you, you have nieces and nephews who, you know, adore you. Your life is good, you have a good job, you have a good home. And all you're doing by adding this person to your life is giving yourself more heartache.
Wow.
All you're doing is adding headaches to your life. Why do you want to add headaches to your life? And I would, you know, in my head, because of what I had seen in media, because of what I had been told, whatever, I don't know what I had allowed myself to believe. The struggle is just a part of it. And my dad, who all my life I swore was going to be the person who was like my, you know, my guiding, my compass when it came to that, was literally telling me, just, he wouldn't say no, he would just say, but why do you want to make your life more difficult? And again, 15, 16-year-old me could not, you know, understand that what he was saying was so simple but so true, because I thought, well, if it, you know, the struggle, like we said, the struggle is part of it. The struggles, it's just, we're on a journey until we get to the place where we need to be. But in reality, if I had listened to that,
Yeah.
I would have avoided the heartache and the headache, because I would have said, yeah, wait, my life is fine. Like, these people are not adding to my life.
Yeah.
In fact, every time I talk to them, I'm left feeling more insecure. I have much more doubt. I have much more anxiety. I have much more concern about who I am and where I stand, like just in life and with my friends. And, we talked about how it even ended up affecting friendships. Like, our friendship got, because that's what happens. Like, these people who will emotionally abuse you, fine, there was never any violence, but they isolate you. And I was very isolated for a long time in my 16, 17-year-old, that time frame. I remember that there was times that I just didn't even leave the house for months. Like, I wouldn't want to hang out with anybody. I wouldn't want to talk to anybody, because I need to know if things are going to work out. I need to see if things are going to happen. And all I did was add heartache and miss out on these really good opportunities to maybe even have more meaningful relationships with friends, with family, because I love the drama, or maybe I didn't know that I loved the drama, but it was part of it. And eventually it's going to make sense. And it didn't.
Yeah. And I think it's that back in the day, I was so afraid of being alone that I was willing to be with somebody at any cost. When in reality, now looking back as a woman in her 30s, it is better to be alone than, in Spanish, es mejor estar solo que mal acompañado. It's better to be alone than accompanied by somebody who is not adding value to you. And I didn't know that in the moment, exactly what you're saying. And I want to highlight something that Mary said so it doesn't go unnoticed. Also, isolation is a huge red flag. If the person you are with has to isolate you to keep you, only wolves have to surround you and isolate you to keep you. Because if they're adding value to your life, they know your mom will see it. A person who is adding value to your life, your best friends will see it. A person who is adding value to your life, your leaders in church and people like that, they will see it, even if it takes them a while. So, one thing is, my parents and my friends and everybody didn't like him at first, but then eventually they gave him a chance and they came around because they saw how much he tried. That's okay. But then it's another thing of, no, your parents don't like me, so let's rebel against your parents. Your friends don't like me, so we can't hang out with your friends. And really what they're trying to do is they want you alone because you're weaker alone.
We can't make it official because your dad will never approve.
Yes.
So I have to keep stringing you along. We'll talk about this in 3 months. Those things. That's a really big red flag, and it's important to point out because it builds on. It ends up not just making you difficult, but it ruins the relationships around you. And something.
And then when you break up, you have no friends.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something that I do want to point out too, like you mentioned, it's better to be alone than to be mal acompañada. If there are any over 30, like older church ladies watching, I'm gonna send you a message. Don't be calling young girls jamonas just because they don't have their life figured out by 16.
Yeah.
That is a big
You're contributing to the toxic culture.
That was such a big thing for me because, like I said, everybody in my family, by the time they were 15, 16, they knew who they were going to marry. My brother knew my brother knew who he was going to marry. He just had to wait to be old enough until they could get married. My sister knew who she was going to marry, but she just was waiting to be old enough, and as soon as she was, they got married. My other sister, the same thing. So here comes Mary. She's 17, 18, hasn't ever had an official boyfriend, and all these ladies in the church, y la boda, y el novio pa' cuando? When are you going to get married? When are you going to find a boyfriend? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And I thought, I just got to, whoever I can
gives me
find.
the time of day,
yeah, whoever I can
it's
find.
on.
Whoever is here, of course, they had to be a leader. Of course, they had to have, some sort of, standing within the church. But as long as they check off those boxes, they're good. Let's do it. And then I think about the situations that I was in, and I was like, no, yeah, he was a leader. Yeah, he had a group. Yeah, on paper, he looked great. But as I tell this story back, being, 29, I see the look of like horror on people's faces because they were like, but then you still talk to him after that? And I'm like, yeah, I really thought he cared.
The thing is, if you already think you're behind, then in trying to catch up, you move the relationship further than it needs to be. And this is actually, and my dad spoke to me about this also. Again, my dad was very wise in that he didn't openly, he would guide me, but he didn't openly, staunchly go against any of my relationships because he knew that it was only going to make me dig my heels in further. Yeah. But once I came to him afterwards and told him, well, also, I hadn't told him half of the things that had happened because obviously when you know you're in a toxic relationship, you know that people are going to tell you you're in a toxic relationship. So you hide half of the aspects of the toxic relationship. But, moving further along, when I finally came clean, so to speak, with my mom and my dad, and I was like, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this. My dad was like, well, people like you are the reasons why guys like that shop at church. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, yeah, guys like that shop at church because they know that girls at church, they're like, he said, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Why? Because we all want commitment so badly that we are willing to let you string us along. We are willing to let you, you want to come back in a year? No problem. Come back in a year. I will still be here waiting on you with a wedding dress on. And we give ourselves so easily. And we advance the relationship light years beyond where it really is. Like on our second date, we're already thinking like, okay, what song are we going to use for the slideshow? And in the reception, we're thinking that already on our second date, on our third date, on our fourth date, which is why I say you have to have a little bit of malicia, a little bit of hood, a little bit of something in you that says, hey, if I got to drop this guy, I got to drop him. But because we are so commitment and so loyalty oriented, we make it easy for some of the abusers to have a field day, which is something I want to highlight because if you are new to the church, take it from someone who's been in the church for 31 years, because I'm about to be 31 in December, and I grew up in the church. My parents were already ministers when I was born. They opened the church when I was 2 years old, but they were in Bible school literally when I was coming into this world. So take it from me, who has known a lot of church people and a lot of pastors' sons and a lot of worship directors and a lot of small group leaders. They can be just as predatory as anyone else because there is nowhere easier to be a predator than in a place where they're going to come a-flocking, So the wolf preys on the sheep because sheep are naive and they're easy to catch. And unfortunately, women in the church are easy to catch because you promise them a wedding ring. And even if you show them all the opposite, the promise of that wedding ring is still there. And so in my case, I had a lot of, yes, I cheated with you. Yes, I cheated on you, but you're the one. I got that a lot from one specific individual who said, I don't love her as much as I love you. So just give me some time to figure out which one. But I said, but you just said that you don't love her as much as you love me. So like,
what do you need
we
time
going to do
for?
this or not? No. Give me a little bit more time. And so I want to illustrate also 3 things. So I'm going to give you guys some free therapy because these are 3 things that I learned in therapy when I started to go to therapy. And one of the questions that I had to ask myself and my therapist asked me also was, Vane, why'd you let it happen? Why did you only get called what you answer to. And the fact that I had fallen into 2 predatory, toxic, emotionally abusive relationships, neither of which with my wonderful husband who I got to once I had healed. And so I was one of those people who in Latina culture, I got married, quote unquote, old, oh my God, I was 25.
I was 26. How
and
dare
in Christian culture, you're supposed to meet your husband, like you said, at 16 and have a beautiful love story where he was your first and only kiss and where you've never known any other love.
Which we're not knocking, but it doesn't happen for everybody. And you don't have to rush to make things work that aren't just because it's not your story.
Yes. Yeah. Because I hated Stephanie Castro.
Same.
I didn't hate her. I loved her. But Stephanie Castro is her sister-in-law who found her wonderful brother who is the sweetest man on the whole earth. He's like a brother to me. So it's like my dad, my husband, my brothers. Wait, my husband goes before my dad. Don't edit that out. But it's like my dad, my husband, my brothers, and then there's Ricky there. Yeah. And I would look at Steph. Steph, we're all about the same age. Yeah. And I would look at Steph, and Steph did meet her husband in church at 16 years old. He was never unfaithful to her. He always treated her like a queen. Yes. And I would look at her and I would say, I hate your face because you're so lucky. I'm over here crying and getting abused, and you have this wonderful man. And that was Steph's case. But one thing I will say about Steph is he showed her that the entire way. Yes. As Rick's, honorary sister, and you're his sister, I never saw that relationship give bad fruit.
No, not and once. I can attest, I was their chaperone the entire time they were dating, which was super annoying because, again, you're going through all this drama, and then you're having to, literally be in the backseat watching these two, people in love and be, really perfect and great. And he really did. My brother, to this day, Stephanie does not have to open the car door because my brother will go and he will open the car door and let her in. And that's not something it's not, my husband doesn't always open the car door for me, but it was something so simple that he really made it a point that he was like, nope, don't get out. And she wouldn't even she wouldn't move until he came. And it was something so simple that I was like, wow, he just always wants her, wants to treat her with respect. If she was going to come over, he would go pick her up and bring her to the house. She never had to make the really long drive from Hollandale to Pembroke Pines because that's not what she's going to have to do. He would always have attention to detail. He would always have these little things that I was like, that maybe that's what it should look like, but let me be stubborn and go through my own drama over here. But yeah, it's what the fruit, like you said, fruit
I think what happens is that we think that the bad fruit is going to turn good with enough patience. Yeah. And that's just not how it works. No. But I want to bring to light, going all the way back around. So in therapy, I learned about a concept called emotional blackmail, which is what I was allowing people to do to me over and over again. And so let me explain to you guys the concept of emotional blackmail is if you don't do, so we know what regular blackmail is. Regular blackmail, if you've ever watched any show, because for some reason blackmail makes it very interesting, which is why I think that we give into it. Blackmail is very interesting. Blackmail is, if you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to release these letters. I'm going to send this email. I'm going to kill your family member. If you don't do what I want you to do, something very bad is going to happen to you. Emotional blackmail is, if you don't give me the emotional response that I'm looking for, then I am going to inflict an emotional punishment on you. And there are 3 ways that this usually happens, and they usually occur in order. So the first is anger. So when you come to me and you say, hey, how come I saw you on a date with another girl? For example, which is something that I did do to one of my ex-boyfriends. The first response in a person who is emotionally blackmailing you will do is, how dare you distrust me? Are you crazy for asking me that? What is wrong with you? They hope and they think that their anger will intimidate you into silence. And here's where I have my Oprah moment. Were you silent or were you silenced? They silence you with intimidation. So the first thing they do is anger. The second thing they use is shame. Shame is next on the emotional blackmail, process or order. Because the second thing they do is they say, I can't believe that you don't trust me. I can't believe that after everything we've been through, this could be the thing that makes you give up on me. And you see what I'm doing there? I am making you feel bad because I went on a date with someone else. I am making you feel bad because you don't post about me on your Instagram. I am making you feel bad because, I blew up and I yelled at you 2 weeks ago at a party. I can't believe that you're giving up on a relationship. I can't. And it's always like, I can't believe. It's always like, it's always they're taking the emotional high road and you're taking the emotional low road. And then the last and the final, if the anger doesn't work and the shame doesn't work, then the last is pity. All right, I guess if you're going to break up with me, it's okay. But I'm just going to be here longing for you and loving you till my dying day. And you're going to have to live with the fact that I'll never be happy. And it's like, whoa. my friend, your happiness is your own responsibility and it is not my responsibility. Yeah. But they take you through all of those things basically because they want to blackmail you. They're keeping their happiness up here and they're saying, you have the power. If you give me the emotional response I want, then I will give you, you know, the satisfaction of knowing that you're a good person. But you're a good person either way.
And if I could just interject, that could happen with anybody. But I think it was especially easy for it to happen to us because of the age gap that we had. We were young girls. We were in our teens, in our late teens, and these were older guys that, to be honest, now that I'm older, had no business.
Nope, should not have been
messing with us. They had no business pursuing us.
Which that's part of church culture as well. Yeah. Because since you think that they're gonna marry you right away, you think it's okay that he's 24 and I'm 17. Because when we're married, it won't matter.
It would never fly outside of the halls of church. Never, ever, ever would anyone be allowed without the threat of jail to pursue a girl that is under 18 when they are much older. But
don't give your number to somebody who is too old for you. Just don't give them your number. They don't need your number.
And if you're an older guy watching this, like, bro, first of all, why are you watching this? But second of all, I promise you there are girls your age at church. Like, it's cool.
Or they exist.
Or wait, But I feel like it was so much easier for that to happen. To us, especially, I mean, I wouldn't even, like, putting myself back in that situation, I don't even think I would go past fear, you know, to allow those other things to happen, because I would be like, okay, like, no, you're right, you know, like, I was just,
so immature.
Of course, this is just me, like, I can't believe it, you know, I have to act like an adult, you know, like, but I was 16 or 17, like, I should not have been forced to deal with the drama that I was forced to deal with, because that wasn't in my wheelhouse at that time. Like, I was just trying to get through finals. Like, bro, I was trying to graduate high school.
If you're taking AP geometry, you should not have to major in emotional blackmail.
Literally, like, I cannot get through, you know, reading The Handmaid's Tale or Shakespeare in high school and also have to figure out your emotional baggage.
In real life.
Yeah.
Which I want to say something also, just because I have it here in my notes and I don't want the podcast to end without us saying it. Guys, secrecy, and I think Mary said something about it, but I want to really highlight it. Secrecy is a huge red flag, because everything, when brought to the light, you know, the Bible says the truth will set you free. And it says that everything that is right is done in light and not in the darkness. If something has to be done in the darkness, and let me tell you why that's so important, because in both cases of me being cheated on, well, in one case, I'm going to tell you guys a story. In one case, the girl worked down the hall from me. We both worked at the church offices. And, juicy, here's a tea, on Vanessa's life. And like Taylor Swift once said, if you didn't want it on a podcast, you shouldn't have done it to me. So if you're out there,
you know,
putting all your business out
there. That's a fair point.
I'll put his name and his at the bottom. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. But the person worked down the hall from me. But here's what happened. He told me, hey, this girl has had a crush on me for a long time, and I don't want her to feel bad. So let's not flaunt our relationship. You know, let's not talk to each other in the hallways of the church staff or anything. Let's not flaunt our relationship so that she doesn't feel bad, because she likes me. We've never been together. I've never spoken to her. I've never given her the time of day. But she does like me, and I am the most, you know, obviously he was the most empathetic, most Christian man I've ever met. So I was like, wow, Jesus himself, you are amazing. High five.
He's guarding everybody's
heart. What he was telling her was, Vanessa is crazy and she's obsessed with me. And I'm afraid of getting fired, he told this girl. I am afraid that she's going to tell her dad, because this is all within the context of a church staff. I'm afraid that she's going to tell her dad something and get me fired. So what would happen was that me and this girl would pass each other every single day, and me thinking I was being empathetic and sweet, I would simply, you know, I'd look at her and I'd just kind of be like, whatever, but I would act like I didn't have anything to do with this guy. I would act like we didn't post on social media. We didn't post, I thought I was being so Christian. I thought I was being so kind. And in the same way, she thought she was being respectful. She thought she was being professional. And it wasn't until after that we would find out that sometimes in the morning he'd be with her, And in the afternoon, he'd be with me. And every time somebody would tell me something, or somebody would tell her something, we would never communicate. Why? Because we had to keep this big secret. Like, no, I can't talk to her. Guys, if your relationship is a secret, ask yourself why and make it not a secret.
If you are hiding text messages, if none of your friends can know, if nobody around you needs, you're constantly grabbing your phone because, like, that conversation can't happen out in public, that's a problem.
It's not helping you because nobody, I think, wants to surprise people on the day of their wedding. So if you are moving towards a serious relationship, now I get it. You guys have only been on 2 dates. That's fine. He doesn't have to put you on his Instagram after 2 dates. But is it that he's a low profile or is it that it's a secret? There's a big difference. And I remember specifically one time that the other individual, because remember I was cheated on twice. I was in 2 emotionally abusive, toxic relationships actually very close to each other. And I remember that when the moment finally came, and this is where emotional blackmail comes into play, because he didn't have any pictures of me, he didn't have any pictures of her. I wasn't sure if they were together or not. She probably didn't know I existed or whatever. I don't know. And in that case, we didn't work close together. We never really saw each other. We went to 2 different churches. But I remember the day that I said, I'm going to break the secrecy. I don't want this to be done to me again. At this point, it was already the second time it was being done to me. So what I did was I told her. I got in a text thread with both of them. Mary knows because Mary was the one who facilitated the phone number of the girl because I didn't have her phone number. She went to a whole different church. But Mary, through her ways, secret agent ways, she got me the number of the girl, and I put the girl and the guy in a text, and I said, hey, just want us all on the same page. Here are the texts this guy's been sending me. And I sent all the receipts. It's one of my proudest moments of life. I'm still to this day glad I did it. But I remember that because he was so used to emotionally blackmailing me, the first thing he did was call me. It was the last phone call I ever took of his. But the first thing he did was call me, and he was so enraged. And I remember that what he said, I was going to pick you. I was going to tell you tomorrow that it was you and not her. And I was like, whoop, you were a little too late.
What a prize.
Yeah. So don't be surprised if you are involved in a toxic relationship. If this podcast has helped you in any way, just like kind of see bad fruit in your relationship, don't be surprised that the person who is emotionally abusing you is not going to easily let go of his or her punching bag. Yeah. They are going to try, and so they're going to do the emotional abuse again. I remember he was like, I was going to pick you and this and that. And I remember the exact next day, less than 24 hours later, this guy that hadn't posted in, the whole time he was with this girl, which I'm unsure how much it was, because I secret, obviously. He all of a sudden put up a picture of her, and he published it to the world, which what I'm guessing is, they had a discussion, they had a fight. He went ahead and picked her. He saw that I wasn't a good one to pick, I'm a flight risk, I guess. And he immediately then, what did he do? He was emotionally blackmailing her as well. Because he was basically saying, I'm giving you what you want now. I'm giving you the pictures on Instagram. I'm making you mine publicly. Accept me and stay with me.
Yeah.
And emotional abusers are emotional abusers, and they rarely change without therapy and the Holy Spirit and help from others that do not need to be you.
Yeah, you just reminded me. They will come out of the woodwork even years later. Because I remember we were talking, when we talked last week, I said, it's funny because after all the drama and all the nonsense, years later, I was just hanging out at home. I logged onto Facebook, and I had a comment on a picture from this person commenting on my size, like saying that I had gained weight. And then after I hadn't heard from them I think it was at least 2 to 3 years, texted me to say what happened. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, oh my God, what happened to me? Wait. And then I was like, wait, I'm having
what happened? Why had you gained weight?
Why had I gained weight? Wow. He was still very, very much concerned because I guess he needed, I don't know. I don't know what he wanted me to do for him in that moment. But he was very concerned. And I remember that I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I need to work out. I need to do this. And then I was like, wait. I haven't heard from this loser. I'm sorry. I haven't heard from this person in years because they were a hot mess express. Life like blew up and they disappeared. And he's going to come out of nowhere to comment on my size and make me feel insecure when I'm like over here minding my own business. Like, will he really stop at nothing to have some sort of like
response?
Yeah, some sort of response, get a reaction out of me, you know, maybe hook me back in. And I remember that was the day that I was like, no. And I thought at that point I had been like, no, this is done. Like, this is out of my brain. This is gone. But no, that was the day that I was like, oh, no, he's really just trying to, like, never let me have an emotionally healthy relationship with anyone. Yeah. But he's not going to have one with me either because literally my teen years are proof of that. So what are we doing right now?
And what we see a lot in these type of individuals, mostly, so the profile for this type of individual, while they have very many different forms that they take, usually there are children who needed attention, were starved for attention, were themselves abused, and they learned that any attention is good attention, you know, like any publicity is good publicity. So the response that they get from you, it reminds me a lot of my aunt used to teach, well, she still teaches elementary school, but she used to specifically teach preschool, and we all know those kids, you know, that they would rather get in trouble by the teacher than be ignored. You know, I'd rather throw these crayons on the floor and get yelled at than be ignored. And we see that a lot with these individuals, you know, these guys and girls that go after other people and kind of pick their buttons, because when you show that you're angry, you're, to them, unfortunately, they have a lot of work they need to do within themselves. You are showing that you care. So if you would have lashed out and you would have said, how dare you, you know, why are you commenting on my size? I gave you the best years of my life and you're a pig and you're an emotional. In a sense, you're fueling his ego because he's thinking, I still got it. I can still get a rise out of her. I can still get an emotion out of her. And a lot of us are in relationships. A lot of, well, I hate to say it like this, but a lot of you guys, because me and Mary have moved on, thank God. I only say that to defend our husbands in case somebody's saying, she said a lot of us. Is that her? No.
Husbands are great.
But a lot of people are in relationships where you think that you're getting through to the person because you're yelling at them and you're like, no, yo no me dejo. You know, I give myself my place. A lot of us, we say that. I give myself my place. I did that. When really what I would do is I would yell at this person, but I would continue having them in my life. And he liked the yelling. That did something for him. You know, that tickled his fancy. He liked it. Part of it. You know, some people, it's part of it.
It's part of the roller coaster.
It hurt so good, you know, like in his mind. And where I had to get to the point where I said, you are not going to have a place in my life, neither for positive, nor for negative, nor for neutral. You have no place in my life, period. And here's what I want to end this podcast with. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was not Jesus Christ. And I'm going to end here because I you know, we're out of time, but I had to come to terms with the fact that, yes, this person needed Jesus. He also needed therapy. He also needed emotional healing. He also needed, you know, interior healing. He needed a lot of things, but that didn't mean that I had to give it to him. The other day I posted something on my Instagram. I said, your peace should be non-negotiable. Absolutely. And my peace at that moment was 100% negotiable. I will give you my peace. I will give you the opportunity to ruin my day, ruin my self-esteem, ruin, you know, everything, ruin my experiences. You know, I can't tell you how many barbecues he ruined, how many vacations, because we were in a long-term relationship. He went on vacation with me and my family and things like that. And I can't tell you how many experiences he ruined for me. You know, the first time I ever led worship in a big event, we fought. And I think we fought because he wanted to make sure that I was still going to pay more attention to him than I was to the dream that I was accomplishing. But I remember crying in a bathroom at, do you remember that event that we had at Nova? Yes. It was a redoma that we had at Nova, and it was my first time leading worship in a big stadium, and I had these long Kim Kardashian extensions. I had like my blazer over a dress. That was when I was first coming in. I don't know why that's relevant, but I just needed to tell you guys that I looked good.
She did.
And I was in the like a few minutes after I led worship, he picked a stupid fight with me, and I was in the bathroom crying my eyes out. I had a whole glam team help me with my makeup, and my makeup was running. Why? Because he couldn't stand that I would pay more attention to the Lord and to my own dreams than to him. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, I had to come to the point where I realized that I was with him for a few reasons, but one of the reasons I think also was I can't give up on him. I need to show him what love is. I need to help him heal. You don't.
No.
You know, girl who's out there, woman who's out there hearing me, you don't. You can't possibly love him more than God loves him. And especially if he's already in the church, then praise God. He's in the perfect place to find healing. And if he threatens you and uses that emotional blackmail so that you can pity him and says, well, you know, now I'm just going to go down a rabbit hole of drugs or drinking or sex and rock and roll, you can just say, you know what? I recommend that you speak to your youth leader. I recommend that you speak to your mother or father. I recommend that you find yourself a good therapist. But I am not in a position to lift you up from that place.
And know that it's not your responsibility.
It's not.
It's not. If he has things that he needs to work through and he tries to use those things as, you know, can't you just forgive this? Can't you just see past this and wait for me to have it all figured out? No, you don't have to. You know, should you know, life find, you know, should I find life find us, you know, down the road when you have things figured out? And we're having a totally different conversation because somehow you have actually done the work, that would be a different conversation. We did not find that to be the case in either of our experiences. But what I will tell you is that it is not your responsibility. You do not have to feel guilty for not accepting what you will not accept. And that's okay. You're allowed to say, these are my standards. This is what I will accept. This is what I'm okay with. These are the boundaries that I have created. And unless you are willing to respect those and have a relationship with me within those and honor my boundaries, I think sometimes we're like, you know, like we're with people who respect our boundaries but are willing to kind of like, you know, are you sure? Like, can I nudge you? No. Will you respect and honor my boundaries? And if they will, then that's somebody that you can have a relationship with. And if they won't, then that's not somebody that you need to take, you know, along for the ride with you. That's not somebody that you need to take responsibility for. You are responsible for you and your life and your growth and your healing. And eventually when you get married, then that's a different conversation. But you don't want to marry somebody that you're always trying to fix or change. You know, like, what is it? I think Heather Lindsay posted once that unless a man is in diapers, like, you can't change him.
Yeah.
And that is just, there's nothing more true than that. Unless he is your baby boy in diapers, you will not change him unless he is willing to do that work himself.
So many languages in the world, Mary, and you chose to speak straight facts. Yes. Love it. Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in once again to Her Podcast. If this podcast blessed you and if you think there's someone in your life who needs to hear it, let's pray she doesn't get offended. But send this to her, post it, share it. We really want to get the message of emotional health and freedom out there to all the young ladies listening. And thank you guys so much, especially if you've been with me since our first episode. And I hope that it's been a blessing to you. So see you guys next time. Bye.